What in the actual hell just happened?
What in the actual ass?
Conor McGregor, my all-time favorite fighter in combat sports history to ever walk the face of this planet, is out of his highly anticipated matchup against Michael Chandler at UFC 303. And I know the news dropped about a week ago, and we've all had a chance to digest to this back-breaking, heartbreaking, spine-tingling, gut-wrenching news of the MMA world, that is. But hey, you're going to get my honest, pure, true reaction to this because I want to cry just talking about this. I had tickets to go to this fight. Hell, this has my ex written all over it because she knew I was going to this fight. I made arrangements for her to watch my son a little bit longer, but she knew this fight was going to happen, and I knew she voodooed the hell out of this event, out of this fight, to make this fight not happen. So yeah, it is truly, truly heartbreaking for all the money I've spent, for all the hotel arrangements I've made, the travel arrangements I've made, just for Conor McGregor to not be fighting on this card. It's truly, truly sad. But what I'm going to talk about is two things. Number one, the fight's off. We don't know when it's going to be again. We don't have that clarity. We don't have that cushion on when the postponement of the fight will be. There's rumors that there's August. There's rumors that there's September. Mainly because there is not many slots available for pay-per-views when you look at the grand scheme of things. The UFC's going to Australia. The UFC's going to Utah. The UFC's going to London. The UFC's having their Mexican Independence Day fight card at the Sphere. Who knows if they're going to headline that event with Conor McGregor at the top of the bill. It would be great, but again, Dana White has already said, I want Mexicans to fight on that card. But the biggest task at hand and the biggest problem I have probably in this entire thing is that the UFC and combat sports in general, boxing has this issue as well. I'll get into that later. The UFC books fights too far out in advance. This fight was announced, I remember exactly when, because it was the day after my birthday, UFC 300. Dana White had that famous press conference after UFC 300 in which he announced McGregor versus Chandler via a piece of paper. And right then and there, I had a little bit of skeptical hippo eyes, mainly because, all right, when you look at the months and the landscape of how far this fight actually is, you'll see, all right, we basically got 2 more weeks in April, and then we got to wait all of May. And then basically we had to wait all of June, 2.5 months to wait for a Conor McGregor fight. That gives someone time to get hurt, whether it have been Conor or whether it have been Chandler. I just felt that it was taking way too long for June 29th to come when Conor McGregor is a star of stars. He is the biggest star the UFC has ever had. When you think of UFC, you think of Conor McGregor. Even if you just got into UFC last week, you know who Conor McGregor is. And now he's fighting a guy, one of the most exciting lightweights in UFC history, Michael Chandler. In combat sports history, Michael Chandler. You mean to tell me we need 2.5 months of hype when we already have basically a year of hype waiting for these two guys to fight? I don't think we need that much hype. We should have got these guys in the octagon right away. Maybe even on June 1st. Even if you had to move that June 1st fight card from New Jersey to Las Vegas, you could have got it done. That's what should have happened when you have a star like Conor McGregor. You don't need to sell. Conor McGregor could fight a water boy from Ohio. That fight card would sell 1.5 million buys. It's just that simple. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out Conor McGregor draws like none other. Then piggybacking on that, another example of why the UFC shouldn't book fights too far out in advance, look at Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Now I know what you're going to say. Mike Tyson's 58 years old. He's going to need life alert in the ring when him and Jake fight. Okay, but put all that aside. Let's say Jake is fighting someone else. Mike Perry, for example. That fight just got announced. Jake Paul had his last fight March 2nd of this year. The Mike Tyson fight got announced March 4th of this year for July 20th. You mean to tell me we had to wait 4 fucking months for these guys to fight? 4 months when Jake Paul, probably the biggest YouTuber in YouTube history. He's a celebrity in his own right. He has his own fan base with millions of subscribers. And Mike Tyson is arguably the most iconic boxer, the most iconic former heavyweight champion in boxing history. You mean to tell me he doesn't have millions and millions of fans who would tune in to watch him fight one last time? Why do we need 4 months of buildup for two of the biggest stars in combat sports history just to get in there and fight when we already know that fight would sell like wildfire. And what happened? An ulcer flare-up happened for Mike Tyson, and that fight got postponed for another 5 fucking months. Now, granted, Jake Paul has a fight booked against Mike Perry the same date he was supposed to fight Mike Tyson, but nonetheless, we still have to wait a shit ton of time for the fight that the whole world wants to see. Honestly, I want to see Jake versus Mike Perry, but the casual boxing fan or the casual combat sports fan doesn't want to see him take on the king of bare knuckle boxing in Mike Perry. It's just a giant problem that I have in the UFC and combat sports booking fights that far out in advance. When you have superstars like that, you don't need 2.5 months, 3 months of buildup just for these guys to step into the octagon, because people are going to buy it no matter what. I say at least a month. These guys are professional trained killers. Conor McGregor has a quote that is probably hung up in the UFC Apex, which says, "I stay ready so I don't have to get ready." It is a perfect quote, especially when you're a professional fighter. Now, I know fighters have vacations. They take months off from training, especially after a rough camp, a rough fight. I get all that. But when you have certain superstars, you do not need 2.5 to 3 months to build a fight. Like I just said, a month maximum, especially when Conor's been training the past year, especially when Michael Chandler's been training the past year. Just a month, 1 month of hype and buildup would have been perfect, and this fight could have already happened. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of contract stipulations for the UFC, but I'm sure Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler have a contract stipulation in which they need X amount of time to train. I get all that, but still, you're professional fighters. You need to just get in there and fight. When you're that big of a superstar, you do not need that much time to get ready for a fight. I'm just saying. That moves on to problem number 2. What they filled in for the main event of what should have been Conor versus Chandler, Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira 2 for the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world. I'm probably the only person on this planet that does not want to see this fight. I'd rather see Alex Pereira versus Anthony Smith. This is not a fight we need. We saw this fight happen. Sure, you could say there was some controversy at the end of it, saying that the referee stopped it too early on behalf of Yuri Prochazka's part, because Yuri Prochazka is the ultimate samurai. He will literally go out on a shield, no pun intended. This fight does not need to happen. And as far as intensity-wise, as far as stakes-wise, this fight is not even close to what the Conor versus Chandler fight would have been. The Conor versus Chandler fight was at an 87 on a scale of 1 to 10, whereas Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka is probably at a scale of 2 out of 1 to 10. No, this is just a fight we do not need. We've seen how this plays out. I just don't get it. But hey, for anyone who says that this card is better than a Conor McGregor fight card, you're just a pure Conor McGregor hater. End of story. I get it. Diego Lopez, Brian Ortega also on the card. You still have MVP versus Ian Gary. Yeah, okay, but still, this fight is taking a giant hit because it was supposed to have the highest gate in UFC history at 20 million. Now you're going to have people asking for refunds. You're going to not want to have people buy the pay-per-view. Everything is just going to plummet all the way to the bottom. I guarantee you this fight card barely cracks 500K, whereas Conor McGregor would have easily got over 1 million pay-per-view buys. It's just that simple. Even as a hardcore fan, I'm a giant hardcore fan. Everyone calls me a casual. I've watched the sport for 17 years, and I do not want to see this fight. Am I going to watch? Absolutely. But you best believe I'm going to be refunding my ticket because I came to see Conor McGregor.
How the fuck would you show me something if I couldn't have it?
Like I said, if the UFC doesn't want to keep having this problem, I think they should do this with all fights. Sure, there's some fights that need months and months of buildup and anticipation, but I think with the majority of pay-per-view fights, you should book them at least a month out in advance. That way, there's not the risks of someone getting hurt go down way lower than when the fight camp is extra longer.